Emotional, slightly weary tone. Mom, are you even listening to me? Why can't I go to Mason's party? Everyone's going. Everyone. I stood at the kitchen counter, my hands gripping the edge so tight my knuckles turned white. It was a Tuesday evening in late September, and this was our third argument of the day. Third. And it wasn't even 6 o'clock yet. Jake, I have already explained this, I heard myself say, my voice taking on that exhausted, pleading quality I'd grown to hate. Mason's parents won't be home. There's going to be alcohol. You're 16 years old, and what, Mom? You don't trust me? Is that it? After everything, you still don't trust me? Pause. Before I tell you what happened next, don't forget to subscribe if you love true stories about family, growth, and those moments that change everything. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt trapped in the same argument over and over? What would you do if your child questioned every single decision you made? Soft, reflective tone. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 44 years old, a marketing director at a mid-sized firm in suburban Chicago, and a single mother to one teenage son. And on that particular Tuesday evening, standing in my kitchen with leftover pasta going cold on the stove, I was absolutely exhausted, not physically tired, though God knows parenting a teenager will do that to you. No, I was exhausted from the constant explanations, the justifications, the endless cycle of trying to make my 16-year-old son understand why I made the decisions I made. Slight frustration in voice. Every boundary became a debate. Every rule required a dissertation. Every no demanded a full legal brief explaining my reasoning, complete with precedents and case studies. Mom, you're not even answering me. I looked at Jake, really looked at him. 6 feet tall now, with his father's dark hair and my green eyes. When have you gotten so big? When had his voice gotten so demanding? Jake, I need you to understand. Something I started, and I could hear myself slipping into that familiar pattern. When I was your age, things were different. I know you think I'm being unreasonable, but there are real dangers out there. Studies show that teenage drinking leads to, oh my God, Mom, not another lecture. I don't need statistics. I just need you to treat me like I'm not a child. Pause, emotional weight, and there it was. That word, child, because that's what he was, wasn't he? My child, but somewhere along the way, I'd stopped acting like his parent and started acting like his lawyer, building elaborate cases to justify my right to set boundaries. Fine, Jake said, grabbing his phone off the counter. Forget it, I'm going to my room. We're not done talking about this, I called after him. Yeah, Mom, we are. Sound of footsteps, door slamming. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our argument, cold pasta, Jake's abandoned backpack, my open laptop still showing the presentation I'd been working on before this all started. And I felt something inside me crack, not break, crack, like ice on a lake in early spring. That first fracture that tells you everything is about to shift. Softer, nostalgic tone, let me take you back a bit. Because to understand what happened next, you need to understand how Sarah Mitchell became the kind of mother who explained everything to death. Jake's father, Michael, left when Jake was 8 years old. Not for another woman, not for some dramatic reason. He just left. Decided he wasn't cut out for family life. Packed a bag one Saturday morning and moved to Colorado to find himself. Slight bitterness, last I heard he found himself working as a ski instructor and dating someone barely older than Jake is now. When Michael left, I made myself a promise. I would be enough. Enough parent, enough love, enough everything for our son. I would make sure Jake never felt abandoned, never felt like his voice didn't matter, never felt like he didn't have a say in his own life. Pause. Looking back, I can see where I went. Wrong. I started explaining everything. Why we couldn't afford the expensive sneakers. Why bedtime was at 9:30. Why he needed to do his homework before playing video games. I thought I was treating him with respect, including him in the decision-making process, but somewhere along the way, explaining became justifying, and justifying became seeking his approval. I wasn't just telling him my decisions, I was asking him to agree with them, reflective. The first time I noticed the pattern, Jake was 12. We were arguing about screen time, and I'd spent 20 minutes explaining the research on blue light and sleep patterns and developing brains. Finally exhausted, I said, "Jake, that's my final answer." And he said, "But you haven't convinced me yet, Mom. I should have seen it then." He didn't need to be convinced. He needed a parent who could make decisions without requiring his permission, but I didn't see it. I just launched into another explanation, tone shifts more present, tension building. By the time Jake turned 16, our house had become a courtroom. Every morning was a trial. Can he skip breakfast? Why does he have to make his bed? Why can't he drive to school even though he just got his license last month? And I performed. I presented evidence. I called witnesses. Your teacher, Mrs. Patterson, says. I cited experts, according to child psychologists. I built cases that would make a defense attorney proud, and Jake learned to be a prosecutor. He found holes in my arguments. He demanded better evidence. He appealed every verdict. My sister Linda called it one Saturday afternoon. I was on the phone with her, 20 minutes into explaining why Jake couldn't go to a concert in downtown Chicago with friends. Linda's voice, older, wiser, slightly amused. "Sarah, stop. Just stop. Why are you explaining yourself to a 16-year-old? Because he deserves to understand my reasoning? Because I'm not some authoritarian parent who just says because I said so. There's a difference between being authoritarian and being a parent, sweetie. You're not his friend. You're not his equal. You're his mother." Offensive, I know that. Linda, do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're seeking his approval. And honey, you don't need it. Pause, letting that sink in. I hung up the phone feeling something uncomfortable, exposed, like Linda had pulled back a curtain I didn't even know was there, but I wasn't ready to admit she was right. Not yet. Building tension, the week. After that kitchen argument about Mason's party, things escalated. Monday morning, Jake came down to breakfast in a t-shirt I'd never seen before. It had an explicit logo on it, not obscene, but definitely not appropriate for school. "Jake, you need to change. Why?" And before I could stop myself, I was off. "Well, your school has a dress code, and while this particular shirt might not technically violate it, the message is inappropriate for an educational environment, and it sets a certain tone that, so you're saying I should change because other people might judge me?" "No, I'm saying, well, partly yes, but you're always telling me not to care what other people think." "This is different because..." "How is it different, Mom?" Frustrated exhale. 20 minutes later, he went to school in the shirt. I tugged myself into a corner and he knew it. Pace quickened slightly. Tuesday, he forgot his curfew. Came home 40 minutes late with a shrug and an excuse about his friend's car breaking down. "Jake, this is unacceptable." When I said a curfew, I need you to respect it because why, Mom? I'm 16. I have friends whose parents don't even have curfews. Did you know that? Tyler's mom just says, be reasonable. That's it. Be reasonable. Well, I'm not Tyler's mom. I'm your mother, and I have curfews because studies show that. Studies, Mom? Really? You're going to quote studies at me again? Pause, voice drops, more vulnerable. Wednesday, he skipped 2 classes. The school called me at work. I left a client meeting to take the call, my heart pounding, imagining every worst-case scenario. When I got home that evening, Jake was on the couch playing video games like nothing had happened. Jake, we need to talk about school today. Dismissive, teenager voice. Oh, you mean the classes I skipped? Yeah, Mr. Henderson was just reviewing stuff I already know. Total waste of time. That's not the point. The point is that you made a decision that what, Mom? Wasn't smart, wasn't responsible. I know. You don't have to explain it to me. Clearly I do, because you keep making these choices that, no, Mom, you explain it to me because you want me to agree with you. There's a difference. Pause, let that hit. I stopped mid-sentence, stared at him. Because somewhere in his dismissive teenage arrogance, he'd hit on something true. I did want him to agree with me. I wanted him to nod and say, "You're right. Mom, I understand now. Thank you for explaining." I wanted his approval of my parenting. Soft, vulnerable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every argument, every explanation, every time I'd sought his permission to be his parent, and I thought about what Linda had said. You don't need his approval. Thursday morning, Jake came down to breakfast and asked if he could skip his Friday afternoon classes to go to a baseball game with friends. I opened my mouth to explain why that wasn't going to happen, to talk about the importance of education, about setting priorities, and then I stopped, pause, pivotal moment. No, Jake, you can't skip school. He looked up from his phone, surprised. Why not? And here's where everything changed. Because I'm not comfortable with it. Silence. That's it? That's your reason? That's my reason. But Mom, it's just one afternoon, and we have a sub in English anyway, and I've given you my answer, Jake. Teenager voice, frustrated, confused. But you haven't explained, do you? Why? Calm, firm. I don't need to explain why. I'm your mother. The answer is no. I picked up my coffee, my hands shaking slightly, and walked to the sink. Behind me, I could hear Jake processing this new reality. So that's it? Just ... no. You're just going to be one of those parents now? I turned around and looked at him. Really looked at him. I'm going to be your parent, Jake. And sometimes that means I make decisions you don't understand or don't agree with. And that's okay. Pause. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his backpack and left for school without another word. I stood in my kitchen, my heart pounding, wondering if I'd just made things better or catastrophically worse. Tension building, like watching a storm approach. If you think Jake accepted this new dynamic gracefully, you haven't spent much time with teenagers. The next few days were ... rough, really rough. Friday evening, he asked if he could sleep over at a friend's house. No, why not? I'm not comfortable with it this weekend. But you haven't even given me a reason. I don't need to give you a reason, Jake. The answer is no. Angry teenager voice, this is ridiculous. You can't just say no without explaining yourself. That's not how this works. Calm, steady. Actually, Jake, it is how this works. I'm the parent. You're the child. I make the decisions about what's safe and appropriate for you. I'm 16. I'm not a child. You're my child. And I love you. And the answer is no. Sound of storming off. He slammed his bedroom door so hard a picture fell off the hallway wall. I stood there, shaking, part of me wanting to chase after him and explain, to justify, to make him understand, to make him stop being angry at me, vulnerable, honest. That's the part nobody tells you about parenting, by the way. How hard it is to let your child be angry at you. How every cell in your body wants to fix it, smooth it over, make them happy again. But I didn't go after him. I picked up the fallen picture, hung it back on the wall, and went to my room, reflective. That night, I called Linda. I did what you said. I stopped explaining myself, and he hates me. Linda's warm, knowing laugh. He doesn't hate you, sweetie. He's just realizing you're not going to be manipulated anymore, and that's uncomfortable for him. It's uncomfortable for me too. Linda, every instinct I have is screaming at me to go in there and make him understand, to fix this, to make him approve of you again. Pause, recognition. Yeah, to make him approve of me again. Sarah, listen to me. Jake doesn't need your friendship right now. He doesn't need a debate partner. He needs a mother who can handle his anger without falling apart. He needs someone who can be the grown-up in the room. Soft, uncertain. What if I'm doing this wrong? What if I'm being too harsh? Are you making decisions out of love for him or out of anger at him? Love. Always love. Then trust yourself. He'll come around. Pause, but he didn't come around. Not right away. Building tension and narrative. Saturday morning, Jake barely spoke to me. Ate breakfast in silence, gave me one-word answers when I asked about his plans for the day. Sunday. He asked if he could go to a movie with friends. What movie? With who? What time? Sullen teenager voice. Does it matter? You're just going to say no anyway. Jake, I'm not saying no automatically. I'm asking for basic information. It's the new Marvel movie. With Ryan and Chris. Show starts at 7. What time will you be home? I don't know. 10? 11? Be home by 10:30. Surprised. Wait, you're saying yes? I'm saying yes to the movie with a 10:30 curfew. Is that clear? He nodded, looking almost confused by this reasonable response. Slight warmth entering voice. Here's what I was learning. Setting boundaries without lengthy explanations didn't mean being arbitrary or unreasonable. It meant making decisions based on my values and my knowledge of what Jake needed, without requiring his agreement. Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes it was no. Sometimes it was yes, but with these conditions. But I didn't owe him a dissertation on any of it. Pace picks up. Monday at work, something interesting happened. I was in a meeting with a difficult client, Robert Chen, who questioned every recommendation, challenged every creative decision, demanded explanations for things that were clearly outside his expertise. Usually, I'd spend hours justifying our approach, presenting research, building elaborate cases for why our marketing strategy was sound. That morning, when Robert interrupted my presentation for the 5th time to ask why we'd chosen Instagram over Twitter for his campaign, I paused. And then I said, Robert, we're the experts you hired. This is our professional recommendation based on your target demographic and campaign goals. You can either trust our expertise or find another firm. Pause. Let that land. My colleague Jessica nearly choked on her coffee. Robert looked stunned. Then he nodded. Fair enough. Continue. After the meeting, Jessica pulled me aside. Sarah, what happened in there? You were different, more confident. I thought about Jake, about our kitchen arguments, about learning to trust my own judgment without seeking approval. I'm learning, I said, that explaining yourself to death is just another form of apologizing for having boundaries. Tone shifts. Something changing, softening. 2 weeks into this new approach, something shifted. Subtle at first, like the first warm day after a long winter. You almost don't trust it. It was a Wednesday evening. I was cooking dinner, chicken stir-fry, Jake's favorite. He came into the kitchen and actually set the table without being asked. Didn't say anything, just got out plates and silverware. We ate in semi-comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then, teenage voice, less hostile, more genuine. Mom? Yeah? Why don't you explain stuff anymore? I put down my fork, choosing my words carefully. What do you mean? Like, before you'd give me these long reasons for everything. Now you. Just decide, and that's it. Pause. Does that bother you? He shrugged. I mean, Yeah, at first. It felt like you didn't respect me enough to explain. Gentle, honest, and now he pushed rice around his plate. Now I think maybe you respect me enough to not need my permission. Pause, let that profound statement breathe. I felt tears prick. My eyes. My 16-year-old son had just articulated something I'd been struggling to understand for weeks. Jake, I need you to know something. Every decision I make about you, every boundary I set, comes from love. Not from wanting to control you or not trusting you. From love. The softer teenage voice, I know, Mom, I think I've always known that. Emotional pause. We finished dinner in a different kind of silence. Not awkward or angry, just peaceful, gentle. Reflective narration. That night, after Jake went to bed, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and thought about the journey we'd been on. How exhausting it had been constantly justifying myself. How liberating it felt to trust my own parenting instincts. But more than that, I thought about what Jake had said. You respect me enough to not need my permission. Pause. He was right. Seeking his approval for every decision wasn't respect. It was insecurity. It was me trying to be his friend instead of his mother. Trying to avoid his anger instead of teaching him that love can survive. Disagreement, building to insight, real respect, the kind that actually helps. A kid grow means making hard decisions even when they don't understand. It means being the adult in the room. It means letting them be angry without falling apart, Todd. It means being their parent, not their peer. Warmer tone like sunlight through clouds. The changes weren't dramatic, weren't like some movie montage where everything suddenly becomes perfect. Real life doesn't work that way, but there were moments. Small victories that added up to something bigger. Thursday after school, Jake came home and actually told me about his day. Not because I asked 20 questions, just volunteered the information. We're reading The Great Gatsby in English. It's actually pretty good. Yeah. What do you like about it? I don't know. The writing, I guess. The way Fitzgerald describes things makes you feel like you're there. Gentle, not pushing. That's one of my favorite books. Really? Maybe you could help me with my essay on it? Pause, savoring that moment. He was asking for my help, not arguing with me. Not demanding explanations, just asking. I'd love. 2. Narrative pace picks up slightly. Friday evening, Jake asked if he could go to a party at Mason's house. Will his parents be there? Yeah, Mom, they'll be there. What time should I expect you home? Midnight? 11:30. Teenager voice, negotiating but respectful. Can we do 11:45? I smiled despite myself. 11:45. And Jake? Yeah. If anything feels wrong or unsafe, you call me. No questions asked, no consequences. I'll come get you. Softer. I know, Mom. Thanks. Warm narration. He got home at 11:43. Came in, said goodnight, went to bed. No drama. No arguments. Just normal parenting stuff. Reflective. The following week, I had coffee with Linda. Told her about the changes, about the small moments of connection. Linda's voice, proud, warm. I'm proud of you. Sarah, I know how hard this has been. The weird thing is, Linda, it's not hard anymore. It was hard at first, breaking that pattern. But now, it feels natural, like I'm finally comfortable in my own role. That's because you're not performing anymore. You're just being his mom. Pause, letting that wisdom settle. She was right. For so long, I've been performing the role of good parent, building elaborate justifications, presenting evidence, seeking approval. Like I needed to prove I deserved to make decisions for my own child, but I didn't need to prove anything. I was his mother. That was enough. Tension returning, but different quality. More mature, of course. This being real life and Jake being a teenager, We weren't done with challenges. It was a cool November evening, about 6. Weeks into our new dynamic. Jake came home from school looking off, agitated, nervous. Mom, can we talk? My heart jumped. Those 4 words in that tone never mean anything good. Of course, what's going on? He sat down at the kitchen table, not meeting my eyes. Voice anxious, uncertain. There's this college party this weekend. A bunch of seniors are going, and they invited me and some juniors. It's at Northwestern, so it's not far, and Ryan's brother is going to be there, and no. Pause. Mom, you didn't even let me finish. Calm, firm, loving. I don't need you to finish, Jake. The answer is no. You're not going to a college party. But Ryan's brother will be there. There will be older people to keep an eye on things. I'm sure there will be. And the answer is still no. Building frustration in teenager voice, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're not even considering it. You're just saying no without even thinking about it. I have thought about it. You're 16 years old. College parties are not appropriate for high school juniors. The answer is no. Angry now. So that's it? Just no? You're not going to explain your reasoning or anything? Jake, I've explained. My reasoning, you're 16, it's a college party. Those 2 facts are all the explanation you need. Teenager voice really pushing now. You know what? Tyler's mom said he could go. Ryan's parents said yes. I'm going to be the only one who can't go because my mom treats me like I'm 12 years old. Pause. This is the crucial moment. Here's where the old Sarah would have crumbled. Would have launched into lengthy explanations about brain development and peer pressure and alcohol and all the reasons college parties are dangerous for teenagers. But I wasn't the old Sarah anymore. Calm, with underlying steel. Jake, I understand you're disappointed. I understand your friends are going. And I understand you think I'm being unfair, but I'm not here to be fair. I'm here to keep you safe and help you grow into a responsible adult. And part of that means saying no to things that aren't appropriate for you, even when other parents make different choices. So you're just going to be stubborn about this? I'm going to be your parent about this. The answer is no. Angry, storming out. This is bullshit, Mom. Watch your language. Whatever. Sound of door slamming. Quiet, vulnerable narration. I sat in my kitchen, my hands shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to run after him, to explain more, to make him understand, to make him not be angry at me. But I didn't. I sat with the discomfort of his anger. I trusted that he would be okay being upset with me. I trusted that our relationship could survive his disappointment, reflective, building to insight. Because here's what I'd learned. Good parenting isn't about avoiding your child's anger. It's about being steady enough to weather it, strong enough to let them be disappointed without changing your boundaries to make them happy. Love doesn't mean giving them everything they want. Love means giving them what they need, even when they don't understand it yet. Pause. That weekend, while Jake's friends went to their college party, Jake stayed home. Sulked in his room most of Saturday. Barely spoke to me. Sunday afternoon, he came downstairs while I was reading on the couch. Teenage voice, quieter, more thoughtful. Mom? Yeah, Ryan got really drunk at that party Friday night. Had to be carried to his friend's car. Spent most of Saturday throwing up. Pause. I closed my book, looking at him carefully. Is he okay? Yeah, he's fine now, but it was bad, Mom. Like, really bad. And nobody was looking out for him. His brother was drunk too, and all the college kids just thought it was funny. Gentle, not I told you so. I'm glad he's okay. Teenage voice, vulnerable, almost apologetic. Glad I didn't go. Pause. Let that admission land. I could have said, I told you so. Could have launched into a lecture about how this proved I was right. Could have used his friend's bad experience as ammunition for future arguments, but I didn't. "Come sit with me," I said, patting the couch beside me. He sat down, and we watched TV together in comfortable silence. No lecture, no explanations, just ... Being together, soft, emotional narration. Later that evening, as I was making dinner, Jake came into the kitchen and gave me a hug. Just wrapped his arms around me from behind while I was chopping vegetables. "Love you, Mom. Love you too, Jake." He let go and started to leave, then turned back. "Thanks for saying no, even when I was being a jerk about it." Voice thick with emotion, that's my job, buddy. Even when it's hard. Funny thing about changing one dynamic in your life, it tends to ripple outward. Touching everything else at work, I noticed I was more confident in meetings. Less apologetic about my recommendations. More willing to trust my expertise without over-explaining every decision. That difficult client, Robert, he actually became one of our best clients. Turned out he didn't need a marketing firm that would debate every point with him. He needed a firm that knew what they were doing and could stand behind their recommendations. Amused, self-aware. Who knew? My relationships with friends changed too. I stopped over-explaining my choices, stopped seeking everyone's approval from my parenting decisions. One of the other moms at Jake's school, Jennifer, mother of Tyler, cornered me at a parent-teacher conference. Another mom's voice, slightly judgmental. "Sarah, Tyler told me you didn't let Jake go to that Northwestern party. Don't you think you're being a bit overprotective? They're almost adults." Old Sarah would have launched into justifications, would have felt the need to defend her parenting choices. Confident, final. "That's between me and Jake, Jennifer. But thanks for your concern." Light laugh and narration. You should have seen her face. Like I'd grown a second head. Reflective, building to bigger insight, but here's what I realized. When you stop seeking approval, something magical happens. People actually respect you more, not less. When you're confident in your decisions without needing everyone to agree with them, you project a quiet authority. That's more powerful than any explanation, and that's true whether you're parenting a teenager, leading a team at work, or just living your life. Pause, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you should never explain your reasoning. Sometimes explanations are helpful. Sometimes people genuinely need more information to understand your perspective, but there's a difference between explaining and over-explaining, between giving information and seeking permission, building to key insight. The key is knowing when you're explaining to help someone understand and when you're explaining because you need them to approve. One comes from confidence. The other comes from insecurity, and kids, teenagers especially, they can smell that insecurity from a mile away. Of course, not every interaction became magically easy. Some things still required real conversations, the kind with explanations, and dialogue and mutual understanding. The difference was, now I could tell the difference between a conversation and a debate. Between teaching and defending. It was a December evening, about 3 months into our new dynamic. Jake came home from school looking upset. "Mom, can we talk?" "Always. What's going on?" Teenage voice, genuinely troubled, not argumentative. "There's this girl at school, Emma. We've been talking, like, a lot. And I think I want to ask her out, but I don't know how. And I feel like an idiot not knowing how to do this." Warm, maternal. I put down what I was doing and sat with him at the kitchen table. "Tell me about Emma." And he did. Told me about how they'd started talking in chemistry class, how she made him laugh, how she was smart and kind and loved the same weird indie bands he did. This wasn't a situation that called for a simple yes or no. This was a moment that called for genuine guidance, gentle teaching voice. "Jake, here's what I've learned about relationships. The best ones start with honesty If you like Emma, tell her. Not some elaborate plan or pickup line, just be honest. I really enjoy talking to you, and I'd like to take you to dinner sometime if you're interested. What if she says no? Then she says no, and it'll hurt for a bit, but you'll survive it. And you'll know you were brave enough to be honest about your feelings. That matters more than whether she says yes. Teenage voice, vulnerable. Were you ever scared to tell? Someone you liked them? Pause, honest, connecting, terrified. I was so scared to tell your dad how I felt when we first met. But I did it anyway. And even though things didn't work out in the end between us, I've never regretted being honest about my feelings. Warm narration. We talked for an hour that night. Really talked. About relationships and rejection and vulnerability and courage. About how treating people with respect means being honest with them. Even when it's scary. It wasn't me laying down rules. It was me sharing wisdom, offering guidance, being his parent in a different way, reflective. This is what I'd been missing before, buried under all those explanations and justifications. Real connection. Real teaching moments. When I wasn't busy defending every boundary, I had energy for these deeper conversations. When I wasn't seeking his approval, I could offer him genuine guidance, building to realization. Parenting isn't just about rules and boundaries, but rules and boundaries create the stable foundation that makes everything else possible. You can't build a house without a solid foundation, and you can't have deep, meaningful relationships without clear boundaries. Pause. For the record, Jake did ask Emma out. She said yes. They dated for a few months, continue 5:35 p.m. mutually deciding they were better as friends. And he handled it with maturity and grace that made me incredibly proud. Spring of Jake's junior year brought new challenges. College visits were starting. Future plans were looming. And with them came a whole new set of arguments waiting to happen. Jake wanted to apply early decision to a school in California, 3,000 miles away from Chicago. For me, when he first brought it up, my immediate instinct was panic. Then over-explanation. Then justification for why maybe he should consider schools closer to home. Anxious mom voice, Jake, that's very far away. In the cost of flights, and you miss holidays, and what if something happened? And I caught myself mid-sentence. Pause. Mom? Studying. Breath. Sorry. Let me start over. Tell me about the school. Why do you want to go there? Teenage voice, excited, passionate. It has one of the best environmental science programs in the country. Mom, and they have this amazing research opportunity for undergrads. I could actually work on real climate change projects. This is what I want to do with my life. Emotional narration, climate change, environmental science. When had my little boy started thinking about saving the world? Gentle, honest. Jake, I'm not going to lie to you. The idea of you being 3,000 miles away terrifies me. But if this is the right school for your future, we'll figure it out. Really? Really? Let's sit down this weekend and look at the program together. Look at the costs, the opportunities, what it would really mean, and then we'll make a decision together. Pause, important distinction. But Jake, understand something. I said we'll make the decision together. That means we'll talk about it, consider all the factors. But at the end of the day, if I don't think it's the right choice, I have the final say, because I'm still your parent, and that's still my job. Teenage voice, mature, understanding. I get it, Mom, that's fair. Warm narration. See the difference? I wasn't refusing to discuss it, wasn't shutting down his dreams, but I also wasn't abdicating my role as his parent. We spent that weekend researching the school, talking about finances, discussing what it would mean for both of us. Had real conversations about his future, his dreams, his fears about leaving home. reflective, and you know what? When you're not busy defending your authority, you can actually use it wisely. You can distinguish between the times to say no and the times to say yes. In the end, I supported his early decision application, not because he convinced me with arguments, but because after real discussion, I believed it was the right choice for him. Slight emotion. Is it going to hurt when he leaves for California? Absolutely. Am I already dreading the empty nest? You bet. But parenting isn't about keeping our kids close. It's about preparing them to fly. So what did I learn from all of this? What would I tell other parents who are trapped in that cycle of over-explaining? First, you don't need your child's approval to parent them. You really don't. Children, even at 16, 17, 18, and part of their job is to push back against boundaries. Your job is to hold those boundaries with love. Pause. Second, explaining everything to death doesn't teach respect. It teaches manipulation. When kids learn that they can keep arguing until you wear down, until you give them enough rope to find holds in your logic, you're not teaching them to think critically. You're teaching them that parenting is negotiable, building momentum. Third, there's a huge difference between being authoritarian and being authoritative. Authoritarian is because I said so with no discussion, no warmth, no connection. Authoritative is I'm your parent, I've made this decision, and I'm confident in it while still maintaining relationship and connection. Fourth, kids don't need you to be their friend. They have friends. What they need is a parent, someone who's steady, someone who can handle their anger without falling apart, someone who makes decisions out of love rather than fear, more personal, vulnerable. Fifth, sometimes the most loving thing you can say is no, without explanation, without justification, just no, because you know something they don't know yet. Because you can see around corners they can't see around yet. Pause. And here's the thing that surprised me most. When I stopped seeking Jake's approval, our relationship actually got better. Not worse, better. Warm, amazed, because I wasn't performing anymore. Wasn't putting on a show of good parenting for his benefit. I was just being his mom. Making decisions I believed in. Standing behind those decisions without apology. And that gave him something to trust. Something solid to push against when he needed to, but also something that held him when he needed support. Reflective. You can't build a house on shifting sand. And you can't build a parent-child relationship on constantly changing boundaries and endless negotiations. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is be steady. Be solid. Be sure. It's been almost a year now since that Tuesday evening in September, when I stopped explaining myself to my son. A year of learning and growing and making mistakes and trying again. Jake is 17 now, a senior, making college plans. Growing into a young man I'm incredibly proud of. We still argue sometimes, of course we do. He's a teenager and I'm his mother, but the arguments are different now. They're not about whether I have the right to make decisions. They're normal parent-teen disagreements about curfews and responsibilities and preparing for adulthood. Gentle, specific examples. Last week, he asked if he could take a road trip with friends after graduation. Where, with who, for how long? He gave me all the details without complaint. We negotiated terms, check-ins every day, clear itinerary, responsible drivers, budget limits. Then he said something that made my heart swell. Teenage voice, mature, respectful. Thanks for not just saying no, Mom, and for not saying yes without thinking about it either. Pause. He understood. He finally understood that real parenting is neither permissive nor authoritarian. It's thoughtful. It's careful. It's loving, building to bigger reflection. I think about that exhausted woman standing in her kitchen last September. The one who was so tired of explaining herself, so desperate for her son's approval, so lost in the performance of parenting that she'd forgotten how to actually parent. She needed someone to tell her, you don't need permission to be a mother. You don't need to justify your love. You don't need to build elaborate cases for your right to protect and guide your child. You just need to love them and trust yourself and be steady, emotional, but not overdone. My relationship with Jake isn't perfect. I still make mistakes, still second guess myself sometimes, still worry that I'm being too strict or not strict enough, but I'm not seeking his approval anymore. I'm just being his mom. Pause. And you know what? He respects me for it, not because I'm his friend, not because I never say no, but because I'm consistent, because I make decisions out of love, because I can handle his anger without falling apart, because I'm steady. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, if you're that parent who explains everything to death, who seeks your child's approval for every boundary, who's exhausted from defending your right to parent, I want you to know something. You're not alone. So many of us fall into this pattern, especially those of us who want to be good parents, who want our kids to understand our reasoning, who want to treat them with respect, gentle but firm. But here's what you need to hear. Seeking their approval isn't respect. It's abdication. Real respect means trusting yourself enough to make decisions without needing them to agree. It means understanding that your child's job is to push boundaries, and your job is to hold them. Practical advice tone. So how do you break this pattern? How do you stop over-explaining? Start small. The next time your child asks why in that challenging, demanding way, take a breath. And instead of launching into a 20-minute explanation, try saying, because I'm not comfortable with it, because that's my decision, because I'm your parent and that's what I think is best for you right now. Pause. They're going to push back. They're going to be angry. They're going to accuse you of being unfair, unreasonable, overly strict. Let them be angry. You can handle their anger. You're the adult building confidence. And here's what will happen. After the initial resistance, after they realize you're not going to be manipulated or worn down or drawn into endless debates, they'll start to relax. Stop, because kids don't actually want to be in charge. They want to know that someone is in charge, someone who loves them enough to make hard decisions, someone steady enough to weather their storms. Important caveat. Now, I'm not saying never explain your reasoning. Sometimes explanations are valuable. Sometimes our kids genuinely need more information to understand our decisions. But ask yourself, am I explaining to help them understand? Or am I explaining because I need them to agree? If it's the latter, stop. You don't need their agreement. Warm, encouraging, and for those moments when you do explain, keep it brief. Give the essential information, then stop. If they push for more, it's okay to say, I've explained my reasoning. The answer stands. You're not being harsh. You're being clear. And clarity is kind. You know what's interesting? The lessons I learned about parenting Jake transformed my professional life too. Remember that difficult client, Robert? After our meeting where I stopped over-explaining our recommendations, something shifted in that relationship. A few months later, he told me something that stuck with me. Client voice, respectful, honest. Sarah, when you first started working with us, you were good, really good, but you were also apologetic, like you were asking permission to be good at your job. That meeting where you pushed back, where you stood behind your recommendations without needing my approval, that's when I started to really trust you. Pause. Letting that land. He was right. I had been apologizing for my expertise, seeking approval for my professional judgment, just like I'd been seeking Jake's approval for my parenting decisions, building connection between professional and personal. The same pattern shows up everywhere in life, at work, in friendships. In romantic relationships, wherever we're seeking approval instead of trusting our own judgment, when you constantly over-explain, people sense your uncertainty. They feel your need for their validation. And whether they realize it consciously or not, it undermines their confidence in you. Reflective. But when you can say, this is my professional recommendation, or this is my decision, or this is what I think is best without needing agreement, without defensive over-explanation, people trust you more. Not less. Because confidence is attractive. Certainty is reassuring. And the ability to make decisions without requiring universal approval is a form of leadership. Practical application in my work now. I still explain my reasoning, still provide data and insights and strategic thinking, but I don't over-explain. I don't seek approval disguised as discussion. I present recommendations with confidence. I stand behind my expertise. I'm willing to hear feedback and adjust when needed, but I don't need everyone to agree with me before I can trust my own judgment. Connecting back to parenting, it's the same with Jake. I still have discussions with him, still hear his perspective, still explain my reasoning when it's helpful, but I don't need his permission to parent him. And that clarity, that confidence has made me a better mother. You know what I realized? Sitting with my sister, Linda, over coffee a few months ago? This whole journey wasn't really about Jake. It was about me. Jake was always going to be okay. Kids are resilient. They push boundaries because that's their job. They argue because they're learning to think independently. The problem wasn't Jake's behavior. The problem was my response to it. Vulnerable, honest. I was seeking his approval because I didn't trust myself. Because somewhere deep inside, I believed I needed to justify my right to make decisions for my own child. And where did that come from? Pause. Going deeper. From my own childhood? Probably. From a mother who never explained anything and a father who was barely present. From vowing I'd be different, I'd be better, I'd make sure my child felt heard and respected. Noble goals. But I'd taken them too far. Swung the pendulum so far in the opposite direction that I'd lost my center. Reflective wisdom. There's a balance between the authoritarian, because I said so approach, and the permissive, let's negotiate everything approach. It's called being authoritative, having authority while maintaining connection. But to be authoritative, you have to trust yourself. You have to believe that your judgment, your experience, your love for your child gives you the right to make decisions without requiring their approval. Building to key insight. And here's the really hard truth. Seeking your child's approval often comes from wanting to be liked more than wanting to be a parent. Pause, let that hit. I wanted Jake to like me. Wanted him to think I was a cool mom, a reasonable mom, a mom who understood him. But Jake didn't need me to be cool or reasonable or understanding in that way. He needed me to be his mother, to be the adult, to be steady and sure and willing, to make hard decisions. He needed me to prioritize his long-term well-being over his short-term happiness, emotional but controlled, and that meant accepting that sometimes he wouldn't like me. Sometimes he'd be angry at me. Sometimes he'd think I was unfair, and I had to be okay with that. Had to love him enough to let him be disappointed in me. Now, before you think I'm advocating for never explaining your decisions to your kids, let me clarify something important. There's absolutely a time and place for explanations. Young children need explanations to help them understand cause and effect, to learn about consequences, to develop moral reasoning. We don't hit because it hurts people. We brush our teeth because it keeps them healthy. We're kind to others because that's how we want to be treated. These explanations are teaching moments. They're building your child's understanding of the world, distinguishing, but there's a difference between teaching explanations and justifying explanations. Teaching explanations help your child understand. Justifying explanations seek their approval. Specific. Example, when Jake was younger and asked why he had to go to bed at 8 o'clock, I'd explain, your body needs sleep to grow strong. When you're well rested, you feel better and can learn better in school. That's a teaching explanation. It helps him understand the reason behind the rule. But when teenage Jake asked why he couldn't go to a party with alcohol, and I found myself launching into 20-minute dissertations about brain development and statistics and peer pressure and consequences, ... That wasn't teaching. That was justifying. That was seeking his agreement with my decision. Practical guidance. So how do you know the difference? Ask yourself, would my child be able to make this decision for themselves if they understood all the facts? If yes, then explain, teach, help them develop their own judgment. If no, if this is a decision that requires adult judgment, adult experience, adult responsibility, then keep your explanation brief. I'm not comfortable with that. That's not appropriate for your age. I don't think that's a good choice right now. Pause, and if they push back, asking for more explanation, you can say, I understand you want to understand my reasoning. And I hear that you disagree, but I'm the parent and this is my decision. We can talk about it more when you're calmer, but the answer isn't going to change. Gentle but firm, that's not being harsh, that's being clear. And clarity, even when it's disappointing, is actually a form of kindness. Warm wisdom, like speaking from experience. Here's something I wish someone had told me when Jake was younger. Boundaries are a gift, not a punishment. When you set clear boundaries with love, when you hold them without apology, you're giving your child something invaluable. Safety. Let that word sit. Kids who grow up without clear boundaries often struggle with anxiety. They feel like they're navigating the world without a map. They have to figure out everything on their own, make decisions they're not developmentally ready for. That's terrifying for a child. Even a teenager who acts like they want total freedom, building the point, when you set boundaries, reasonable, loving, consistent boundaries, you're saying, you don't have to figure everything out alone. I'm the adult. I've got this. You can focus on being a kid, on learning and growing and making age-appropriate mistakes because I'm here to keep you safe. Pause, that's the gift, not control, not restriction, safety. Personal example. Jake told me something recently that really struck me. We were talking about one of his friends who's been struggling, getting into trouble, making risky choices, seeming lost, teenage voice, thoughtful, mature. His parents don't really set boundaries, Mom. They're like super chill about everything. And you know what? It's not actually cool. It's kind of sad. Like they don't care enough to say no to him. Pause. Powerful insight. Like they don't care enough to say no to him. That hit me hard. Because that's exactly what I'd been doing before I changed my approach. By being so permissive, by explaining everything to Dev, by seeking his approval, I was sending the message that I wasn't confident enough to parent him, that I didn't care enough to set firm boundaries, reflective. Kids interpret parental permissiveness in interesting ways. We adults think we're being respectful, giving them autonomy, treating them like individuals, but kids often interpret it as, my parents don't care enough to fight for me, don't care enough to protect me, don't care enough to be the adult. Building to insight, setting boundaries, holding them with love, being willing to be the bad guy sometimes, that's not being mean. That's showing up. That's doing the hard work of parenting. It's saying, I love you enough to keep you safe, even when you don't want to be safe, even when you're mad at me, even when it would be easier to just say yes. So here we are, almost a year into this journey, Jake is getting ready for college. I'm preparing for an empty nest. And we're both different than we were. Better, stronger, more connected. Pause. If I could go back and tell that exhausted woman in her kitchen last September one thing, it would be this. You already have everything you need to be a good parent. You don't need your son's approval to prove it. You don't need to build elaborate cases to justify your love. You don't need to explain yourself into the ground. You just need to trust yourself, building momentum. Trust that your instincts are good. Trust that your love is enough. Trust that you can handle your child's anger without falling apart. Trust that your no is just as loving as your yes. Trust that you're the adult and that's okay. Pause. And here's what I know now that I didn't. Know then, when you stop performing for your kids, stop seeking their approval. Stop over-explaining every decision. You actually give them space to grow. Emotional truth. Because they're not spending all their energy arguing with you. They're not learning that boundaries are negotiable or that parenting is a debate. They're learning that some things are just decided by the adults out of love. And that frees them up to focus on age-appropriate challenges like making friends, learning to navigate relationships, figuring out who they want to be, preparing for independence, warm, looking forward. Jake is going to California for college, 3,000 miles away. And yes, part of me is heartbroken, but another part of me is so proud because he's ready. Not because I never set boundaries, because I did. Not because I never said no, because I said it often enough that he learned to respect it. Building. To final insight, I spent so many years trying to be his friend, his confidant, his equal, trying to make sure he understood every decision, agreed with every boundary, but what he needed was a mother, someone steady, someone sure, someone who loved him enough to make hard decisions. And when I finally became that mother, when I finally stopped explaining myself to death and started trusting my own judgment, that's when he finally heard me, not my words. Not my explanations, not my justifications, but my love. My steady, unwavering, unshakable love. Pause, emotional but controlled. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Warm, reflective, bringing closure. It's been exactly 1 year since. I stopped explaining myself to my son. Jake graduated high school last month, gave a speech at graduation that made me cry, thanked his teachers, his friends, and teenage voice from graduation speech. And I want to thank my mom, who taught me that love sometimes means hearing no, who showed me that the best parents aren't the ones who never disappoint you, but the ones who stay steady even when you're disappointed in them. Pause, emotional. I sat in that auditorium surrounded by other parents, and I cried, not because he thanked me, but because he understood. He got it. He finally got it. Soft, warm. Last week, we were packing for his move to California. Going through his room, sorting what to take and what to leave behind. He found an old journal from freshman year, flipped through it, laughing at his younger self. "Mom, come look at this." I sat next to him on his bed, looking at the entry he was pointing to, reading journal entry. "Mom drove me crazy today. Wouldn't stop explaining why I couldn't go to the movies on a school night. Talked for like 30 minutes. Doesn't she get that I'm not 5 anymore?" Present teenage voice, mature, laughing. "I was such a little punk." Mom voice, warm, teasing. "You weren't a punk. You were a teenager." And I was learning. Learning what? Pause, honest. Learning that I didn't need your permission to be your mom. He closed the journal, looked at me with those green eyes, my eyes. Teenage voice, sincere, mature. "I'm glad you figured it out, Mom. I needed you to be the parent. I just didn't know I needed it." Final narration. bringing it home. And that, my friends, is the truth that took me 16 years to learn. Kids don't need parents who explain everything. They need parents who love them enough to be steady, to be sure, to be the adult in the room. They need parents who can say no without apology, who can weather their anger without falling apart, who can trust their own judgment enough to stop seeking approval. Pause. I stopped explaining myself to my son, and that's when he finally heard me doubt not my words, but my love. Final pause. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Sarah's journey, like and subscribe for more stories about family, growth, and the moments that change everything. And tell me in the comments, what's one boundary you need to set without apology? What's one area where you've been seeking approval instead of trusting your judgment? Thank you for listening to this story. May you find the courage to be steady, to be sure, and to trust your own wisdom. Until next time.